So in this video, I would like to explain perfective and imperfective aspects of verbs in Russian. Because aspects are related to the tenses, it is important that we first cover the tenses. Russian has only three tenses of time: the past, present, and future, unlike English, which has continuous and perfect tenses. In Russian, aspects are used to indicate if an action was completed successfully or is still ongoing, and they can be used in the past and future tenses. When speaking in the present tense, the aspects are not needed because it is not possible to speak about the completion of an action in the present moment. Basically, aspects in Russian indicate whether an action was or will be completed or is still ongoing, but tenses indicate when an action happened, so do not confuse them. Because aspects indicate if an action is fully completed or is still ongoing, it is very important that I first show this concept in English so that later it's simpler in Russian. Aspects have a lot more to them because they illustrate the difference between times, especially when you compare them to English. Still, their use is way more defined in Russian. To fully understand the two aspects, you first need to know the grammar of past and future verbs, because visually it would make much more sense. However, the grammar of past and future verbs in Russian is a bigger topic that needs more explanation for the next videos. But still, I'll present some examples in this video just to give some sense of the aspects. Aspects of verbs can be used in the past and the future, and the aspects are the perfective and imperfective. The perfective refers to actions that were or will be completed successfully, and there is a big emphasis on the word successfully. When an action was or will be completed successfully, it implies that the action cannot be undone and cannot change, therefore indicating simplicity and the fact that the action was perfective, without any internal changes. For now, try to think of the perfective as the past or future simple as in English. The imperfective indicates an action that was or will be incomplete, ongoing, habitual, not finished, progressive, or continuous. And the last word is something to keep in mind because I'll use it a lot throughout the video. The imperfective ultimately describes an action, but the outcomes of the action do not matter. Now, before moving on, there's a quick explanation that I would like to redefine, which is something that I said in my first video about Russian, and is something very relevant for this video. Once, I did say that English has no equivalent to the imperfective, and that Russian doesn't have continuous or perfect tenses. While some of that is true, it's not necessarily that English has no equivalent to the imperfective. Because this video focuses on the aspects of verbs, it would not be fair to not compare it to English. I did say that the perfective is equal to the past or future simple, but the imperfective can be equivalent to multiple aspects of the past or future in English. Russian has the aspects of the continuous or progressive, which is the equivalence of the imperfective. However, Russian has no tense for it. When I said that Russian doesn't have continuous or perfect tenses, it means that the grammar, like ing and to have to had in English, does not exist in Russian. Rather, it has aspects but not tenses. English has tenses like the past progressive, past perfect, future perfect, and so on, but Russian only has aspects of the tenses, perfective and imperfective, in the past and future. I just wanted to quickly correct myself on that because it will be relevant in the aspects, and here is what I mean. Suppose we have this verb, работать, meaning to work, and we want to put it in the past tense. How many different variations of it are possible in Russian? Only one in the past. Я работал. We're using the pronoun я, and I did say that the grammar of past and future verbs is for the next video, but using some grammar here will not hurt anybody. Я работал. Now, how many continuous past variations of it are possible in English? I was working, I have worked, I had worked, I have been working, and I had been working. In English, there are 4 to 5 ways to express a verb in the continuous past. This is what I meant when I said that English has continuous, perfect, and progressive tenses. Russian doesn't have any of that in the past tense, whereas English has many. But it doesn't mean that Russian cannot be compared to that. The continuous, perfect, and progressive tenses in English all share one common concept that can be linked with Russian. They're all ongoing actions. The imperfective in Russian is also ongoing, expressing an action that is still happening in time. Therefore, it's safe to say that the imperfective aspect in Russian is equivalent to the ongoing tenses in English. Я работал doesn't mean I worked. It can mean any of these tenses, not because they simply happened, it's because they're still happening. That's the connection between tenses and aspects in English and Russian. And when comparing them, the closest tense to Russian is probably the past progressive. Я работал means I was working, as opposed to I worked. This is how the imperfective works in Russian. and how it also can be compared to English. Now, the perfective aspect in Russian indicates an action that was or will be fully completed, and the easiest way to form it is to put a prefix before the infinitive of the verb. Typically it's po, to make a different meaning. In fact, there are many ways to identify perfective verbs, and it's something I'll explain in a few minutes. Still, we can take работать, put po in the beginning, and we'll have поработать. This verb still means to work, but it can only be used in the past and future. Because we're working in the past, we want to keep it in the past, and it will be я поработал. As I said, the perfective is equal to the past or future simple in English. And considering that I already showed the continuous variations of this verb in the past in English, it's safe to say that я поработал simply means I worked. It means I worked in the perfective not because it's still happening, it's because it fully happened and it's fully completed. This is what I meant when I said that actions in the perfective cannot be undone without any internal changes, indicating simplicity, and the closest English concepts that connect to that are the past and future simples. That's the connection between tenses and aspects in English and Russian, and this is how the imperfective and perfective work in the past tense. Now, let's see what the verb работать will look like in the future. How many different variations of it are possible in Russian? Only one in the future, and it would be Я буду работать. Now, how many continuous future variations of it are possible in English? I'm going to work, I will be working, and I will have worked. In English, there are 3 ways to express a verb in the future, and the following variations are all continuous and ongoing. The imperfective in Russian is also continuous and ongoing. Therefore, я буду работать can mean any of these variations, because they're still happening, and the closest tense to Russian is probably the future progressive. Я буду работать means I will be working, as opposed to I will work. This is how the imperfective works in the future. Now, let's see the perfective. The perfective in the future will have the same prefix in infinitive as in the past, поработать, but the conjugation for the future will be different. Поработать still means to work, and in the future it will be я поработаю. The conjugation is basically the same as in the present, just with the prefix po. Considering that I already showed the continuous variations of this verb in the future in English, it's safe to say that я поработаю simply means I will work, because the action will fully be completed. This is how the imperfective and perfective work in the future tense. And the same idea applies to any verb that there is in Russian. But to fully understand verbs, we need to cover the past and future grammar. This concept is for the next videos. Nonetheless, the simplest way to understand the perfective and imperfective in Russian is to remember that a verb with a prefix is perfective and is equal to the past or future simple in English. If a verb has no prefix, it's imperfective, which is equal to any continuous past or future tense in English. Again, I will not go into the grammar of the past and future, but these are some useful verbs to know. Работать – поработать. Звонить – позвонить. Говорить – поговорить. Смотреть – посмотреть. Любить – полюбить. Спать – поспать. Читать – прочитать. This verb has the prefix pro. Учить – выучить. This one has the prefix вы. Пить – выпить. Делать – сделать. Есть – съесть, поесть. Платить – заплатить. Of course, many other verbs have other prefixes, so I will not cover all of them. Furthermore, there are more ways to tell the difference between perfective and imperfective verbs. One way is a letter change inside the verb, like встречать, встретить, and отвечать, ответить. Another way can be an infix that's added or omitted from a verb. Спрашивать, спросить. Показывать, показать. Забывать, забыть. Вставать, встать. Давать, дать. Понимать, понять. Покупать, купить. The last way can be irregular exceptions, like брать, взять, and говорить, сказать. It's important to note that whenever you see the form of the perfective, whether it's a prefix, a letter change, an infix, or an exception, always remember that that verb can only be used in the past and future, and not in the present. That's why it's better to learn both perfective and imperfective aspects of verbs. Often, you will not see that many perfective verbs, so therefore, you'll have to use the imperfective, which is very good because in case you don't know which aspect to use, using the imperfective will always be simpler and more understandable. In English, we tend to use the continuous ongoing aspects way more than the simple ones, which is why English aspects, like progressives and perfects, have more emphasis and thus are used more. In conclusion, it's very simple to remember these definitions because the perfective and imperfective only affect the past and the future, and also, there are more ways to remember them. For instance, the perfective is used for single events in time where the event was or will be fully and successfully completed, unless it's in the negative. Using the negative with perfective verbs indicates that the person failed to do the action, and it's a concept for a future video. Instead, using the imperfective in the negative will mean that the action did not happen. Additionally, the imperfective can be used in the present tense because the action is still ongoing by definition, like я работал, я работаю, and я буду работать. In the perfective, it's not possible to put a verb in the present because there is no notion of an action that was or will be completed in the present moment. Actions that are repeated an unspecified number of times are also imperfective. Expressions, when you specify a length of time, also use the imperfective. Verbs that express the state of something rather than an action also use the imperfective. Expressing something that didn't happen needs to be expressed in the imperfective, and if there is no result of the action, or it wasn't successfully completed, the imperfective is also used.